Okay, boom, we're on. What's happening, Angus Bradley?
Back in shutdown.
Yeah, lockdown.
Different vibe to the first shutdown. I remember when the last shutdown hit, I had $0 in my bank account. Just like doing the living week to week. So definitely different vibes. I think I had some trauma come back from the last one a little bit.
PTSD.
Dude. Because first 6 months of last year, it was just full-blown survival mode.
Yeah.
Well, not really. It was a bit of a joke because everyone was going down together. At least it was a shared experience.
Yeah. It was a bit of a novelty, wasn't it?
You were sweet. Were you just laughing?
I
Because
was
you had
still
online
training
sorted.
I was still training people outdoors. I remember even going from the gym we were at to training people at the field here where I had a Coles trolley, some dumbbells and that, and I was like, what
humbling.
has the world come to?
Especially like you charge yourself out like triple figures now. You're like, I'm a fucking premium trainer. Like I'm the equivalent of a fitness person that would wear a suit to work.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden you're out in a park.
You still have to give the same service. Even walk around today, I see trainers like with their hoods up, holding a coffee, just not interested at all. I'm like, you're still coaching someone. You still have to give a shit about them.
It depends who you're working with, because my professionalism has just completely deteriorated lately because I actually work with a population that's outcome oriented. But like the reality is the general population usually isn't outcome oriented. They just romanticize a lot of things that they expect from their PT. So you do have to walk the walk and sort of try to inspire people.
You can see the good trainers straight away.
And that's the thing. When I was working with Gen Pop, I did have to clean up my shit. You were always hassling me. You're like, get a fucking haircut. No one wants to pay big bucks for a trainer in a fat loss gym when they got, looking like scraps.
That goes both ways. But now when I see, stay in the shot there.
You see it goes both ways. You see the trainers with like overcompensating with professionalism.
Now you can even see the way someone looks at is watching their client's technique if they give a shit. Not necessarily how they look, if they're like watching what the client's
wandering
doing.
eyes. Yeah,
rather than like you can tell they're not interested at all straight away.
You got to be good in a commercial gym though. Do you remember what it was like? You probably have because Soma, it's a bit different. Like you're in a nice commercial gym,
Premier
but it's
now.
not like Premier now. It's not like the TVs flashing ads at you.
Yeah,
and there's so much stuff designed to get your attention in a commercial gym. Like it is really difficult to be that attentive trainer.
Even like if someone is not taking it serious, when like say curly or something, and then they're trying to get your attention, it just looks so bad. While you're having a laugh, and then people can look at your eyes, who you're looking at. Like it's not subtle at all. They know there's a hot girls after walking in, and all the trainers are smirking at each other.
Thank God we all got forced out of that gym. That gym, like it was the best work environment ever, but God, it was holding us back.
Yeah. So then even I don't know. It's like now you knew them. Constantly seeing people train badly, it's distracting in itself. You're like, and trainers the same way. Heaps
interesting, because like I work in a CrossFit box now, which CrossFit boxes have the worst reputation. Like everyone I expected to see just sheer lunacy. Well, not really, because I knew what kind of CrossFit box I was going into. But since getting out of a commercial gym, ironically, I haven't seen anyone in an instructed session doing any shitty movements or anything like that. Like it's now the CrossFit boxes have become better than the commercial gyms on average. The commercial gyms always have best of the best and worst of the worst, but that CrossFit standard just keeps creeping up and up and up, and all those like semi-private sort of offerings.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Obviously, they were one of the first to value mobility and value all the health of their body rather than going in and.
Because if you want to charge like big bucks for PT now, like a lot of those guys that are doing that aren't actually as good in terms of teaching the movements as the CrossFit guys. Like CrossFit people are so fucking clinical and systematic, almost to a fault, I guess, because they don't necessarily individualize it much. But any CrossFit coach can just walk into a room of 20 people and get them back squatting, for better or for worse, within an hour. Like pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
Whereas like a lot of commercial gym PTs, they take like, fucking 6 months to get anyone anywhere. And they're just like in a one-to-one sort of context. Granted, a lot of the people who walk into CrossFit boxes probably a bit more
advanced anyway. What's your idea of like the perfect match between group training and then also individualization?
It's funny, hey, because like in a certain sense, I feel like personal trainers, we want to believe in the individualization thing so much because it helps us sell shit, but I just feel like it's become too much of a barrier, and it's like people just feel so helpless now. Like everyone thinks that they need an online trainer and they can't help themselves in the gym. And what did you do when you just came in and started lifting weights, or did you have a trainer?
No, I just came and started lifting.
Yes,
looked at men's health.
Yeah, exactly. And like you figure it out. Like it definitely won't be good, but there's a sweet spot. Like the industry just went from like no supervision to now it's just
what's your sweet spot? Because
honestly, CrossFit boxes, I think, as far as something that's realistic, it's a good system. But if you could just diversify it, because CrossFit has become, it's quite narrow. Like there's probably not enough non-traditional movements in there. It's still very structured. A lot of sagittal plane stuff. They're working in running and stuff like that. So maybe in another 5 years or so with a bit more diversity, or maybe if CrossFit, what I would really love, what the utopian sort of dream would be to have sport CrossFit and then like Gen Pop health CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
If they could just tone back the sporty aspect of it a little bit, it'd be like the perfect system, I reckon. And then you take out the nutritional Kool-Aid.
Yeah, no.
If you got some good nutrition into the CrossFit program, which I think a lot of the days of like the keto days of CrossFit are gone, and now everyone's just like, oh, just count your fucking macros.
But they were one of the first to like look at more health aspects than like fitness.
Pure vanity.
Yeah.
Well, I think Greg Glassman, he almost sabotaged the CrossFit Games because his whole reason for starting CrossFit, he claimed, was he wanted to cure type 2 diabetes. Okay. And the guys, I don't want to get sued. He's an interesting guy, but like, you know what I mean? It's he accidentally created a sport, but the intent was, it was meant to be for the Gen Pop. He just missed.
What about some machines that, because obviously...
And that's where CrossFit probably, it's like the barrier is you have to move well to get a lot of benefit from the CrossFit, whereas the machines are nice. And we discussed that a lot last episode because...
It'd be nice to have a little mix where you have your CrossFit and then if you want to do any accessories or you're limited in anything...
They just open up a room and be like, you don't need help in here. Just read the instructions, put the pin in the weights you think are good and pump away. Yeah. And that's the thing as well. Like we should be, as trainers, trying to make ourselves redundant with our clients. Like you want, in a certain sense, your clients after a while staying with you just because they like you and it's a valuable relationship to them. Like you don't want them to be needing you.
Yeah.
And that's why I also like, you're probably enjoying the challenge of online training because it forces you to raise more autonomous clients. And in that respect, I find the online thing quite wholesome because it's harder to get people in that sort of velvet cage where like they need you to get anything sort of done.
No, I'll be the same as you. I tell them, look, if I'm doing a good job, you don't have to meet me forever, but you need to invest more at the start to get your return on that. But even with the online, I've actually gone the opposite way, bringing the face-to-face back into more online now, where for some people who you obviously know may think they can do it on their own, but they just need more babysitting. So I don't let people touch the bit where you can kind of do it yourself unless they're qualified to do that or unless they've trained me already.
So like come in, do like 4 to 6 weeks, show me you can do
not
the thing
even
in front
on
of me.
face to face, but like we might higher level ones, like we'll do a call, we'll do Zoom calls.
Oh, hectic.
Just to get some kind of interaction between, and then when you qualify, when you're training regularly, you're eating to a certain standard, you just need your program set out. Cool, you can do the lower level stuff. But I had people coming in thinking, oh, just give me the program, I'll be fine, and then it just looks terrible. No, like there's too big of a gap between people getting results and people weren't. The expectation was.
The Zoom PT is so fucking dystopian and sterile, but I gotta say, like, I've been really impressed with how easy it is, and it makes you more accessible as a trainer. Like, one of those things is like, if a lot of people don't actually have good trainers that live near them, if they've got a bit of money and they're not close to a major city, like usually the better trainers sort of concentrate in more urban areas. But now it's made that face-to-face thing a bit more accessible, so you can sort of grow a semi-online, but it's still got that like face-to-face sort of vibe. It's not as infinitely scalable.
No.
I think the fitness industry, as business coaches, we got too concerned with scaling our business and.
Yeah, I went back to like, where's my ethics at? I want to scale.
Got to actually try to help, can't say.
It's a fine line. You can swear,
Sorry.
Maybe.
That's a bad one.
Yeah. No, not a bad one for Australians, really, but the Irish people don't care. Maybe.
I'm trying to be better. I got to present clean at something coming up. And well, they won't sack me, but they probably wouldn't ask me back if I say that.
Yeah, you can't be going in like Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes straight away.
The haircut's enough for most people.
Yeah, it's alright. Be yourself.
Yeah.
But, so let me ask you, like, over the last few years, even probably since I've seen you last, tell me how, like, your way of training people has developed. Because even there's a certain general pop people that will look like this that still look to do their own research and find out the best way to train and blah blah blah. But tell me your own kind of journey, who you're learning off, what ideas.
Now, for the first time in my life, I'm sort of entering the education space. So I've sort of taken a little bit of a break from continuing education because the last sort of 18 months to 2 years has just been like drinking from a fucking fire hose of information. And at a certain point, you just got to step away from the consumption and start implementing. Yeah. And like, I think a big part of that then is also trying to teach it to other people, because that's when you're finally forced to like get off the information, to sit down, consolidate and synthesize thoughts. And then before you can synthesize that information for your clients, if you can't synthesize that for trainers, you're in big trouble, because it's going to be a lot easier to communicate it to trainers who sort of get all the jargon. And then I'll be even more effective at implementing this stuff with my clients. So sort of just getting ready for that side of things. Yeah. And just trying to figure out like, can I communicate these ideas clearly to trainers and things like that. So excited to get into that, but a little bit nervous, because just like, what if people just pay for this mentorship that goes on for 8 weeks and then by the end of it they're like, we still don't get it or anything like that. So
yeah, well, that's all right. It's a skill anyway, at least.
But yeah, and that's the thing. I feel like one of the things with shutdown, and I'm contributing to this problem now, is that the upskill industry kind of boomed and it was good, but like, you know, when anything booms like that, it's also going to be weird. And there was just a lot of, just across the industry, I think there was so much consumption of information. And then everyone at the end of it, a lot of the times is left like, are we actually doing anything different? Because how many trainers have you seen? They're at a seminar every weekend.
Yeah, but you're in a small bubble. You don't. That's only might be like the 2% of trainers that you see at all these courses.
But they're the ones that last, right? Most of the other trainers sort of float in, float out.
But even I was lucky working with you guys towards the end of it. While like you point me in the right direction. I said, "Oh, like who are you learning from? These guys? Okay, let me do my own." You just need that point of direction at least. Okay, here's the information.
Yeah.
These are the people doing it really good.
Yeah.
And then go and do your own thing. Otherwise you're like, oh, there's this really strong guy on Instagram. I might buy his like internship. You just don't know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And I guess the next sort of rabbit hole I really want to go down is like the nervous system and like learning about the brain a little bit more, because I guess predominantly my main area upskill the last few years has been like anatomy, biomechanics, more musculoskeletal stuff. But I think I've referenced this quote before. It's like, that's like learning how a car works if everyone's ripped out the wiring, which isn't really how a car works.
You mean like Paul checks
the brain? Nah, you gotta.
And like, just you take his stuff with a pinch of salt as well, but because he'll talk about if a muscle's not developed, I might butcher this, but then you'll have to look at like the nearest organ, how's the blood flow into that organ. You're like, all right, it's crazy, but it makes sense.
Yeah, like, but then the other side of it is at a certain point it gets so complex that there's so much noise in all these dynamic, open-ended, interconnected systems that you're just like, does anything mean anything then if there's so many variables and factors that go into everything? Especially in the evidence-based era, where I think people more so than ever are attached to like, oh, there's the one optimal way to do everything.
Even I'll talk to Nigel, who's someone I'm like, right, here's these topics I've learned about. Can I pay you for a time just to explain or get your thoughts? And it'd be the same thing. It's kind of the reason why he struggles with social media as well, because there's no concrete answer. I'll be like, okay, hip flexors. What's the best way to quote unquote release it? Stretching, isometric, strengthen, and Nigel's like, could be all of those.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, great, okay.
Because everyone's like, oh no, strengthen, like it's just a weak muscle. But then people are just so like sympathetic that like, well, that's not, people aren't going to be supple if they're constantly in like a stress response. So sometimes some of those lower load things can be a stimulus, because what the stimulus is actually getting them into a fucking parasympathetic state for the first time in their life and shutting everything else off. So you're getting a relative stimulus in one area that there was just so much noise around before. And that's shit where I shouldn't really be talking about that, because I actually have no real idea how the CNS works. I've got more an idea than most people, dig into it as well. Compared to someone who actually knows, is specialized in that area. Even here's
another one what he was talking about. So he's looking at George, and like when he was training George, and George said like, right, what exercise do I need to do? And he said, it's similar to what you're talking about, the nervous system. He said, look, you've had a life event and you've carried a certain posture for this period of time because you may have resented the world. but that's just ingrained into your nervous system now.
This
like
is
he
a
calls it
great
angry posture.
Yeah.
And then the other one he talks about is where people, you might go the typical hunch posture, okay, tight thoracic, here's these exercises, but he'll go, okay, the name escapes me what he refers this posture as, but he go, you know, Jordan Peterson
was it Jacksonian regression?
No idea, but you know the way in Jordan Peterson's book, the first paragraph is about success, and it goes back to like organisms like crabs. When crabs will fight, the one that wins gets a big hit of like serotonin and dopamine, and it's chest out, and it's that kind of confident posture. But the one that loses then gets hunched up to like, we can quote, loser posture. So you might have people where their psychology, whether they're trying to hide something, whether they're naturally shy, that's the cause.
The yielding posture.
Yeah, that's the cause of their posture. And I was like, wow, that's some deep shit.
And that goes into like, this is
then could
be triggering for some people,
yeah.
but like a lot of people, you know, wonder why like so many women have pelvic floor issues. And they're like, oh, it's a muscular imbalance. It's like, no, maybe she's been sexually assaulted before or something like that. Yeah. And then you're there as a PT, like trying to mess around with that, and hopefully not. But
no, the same way, or if they may have like big breasts and they naturally like pull their shoulders in to cover them, and then that's just developed into that posture.
Yeah, it's like you're going to need a massive heel wedge and a lot of anterior load to give them something to shift back against them titties.
Yeah. So the same way, then that just develops into that nervous system where, again, you're talking about that, well, your psychology relates to your posture, and then that ingrains.
And as much as it's hard to change, it's also, the CNS can be stubborn, but once it does change, it can change like very, very quick. It's very, elastic or plastic, I guess. But then the trick is just finding the thing that's actually going to put them in a different, and I think environmental change is what drives it for a lot of people trying to mess with the CNS side of things, which is hard when you're meeting someone in the same time and same place and same environment for your sessions all the time. Yeah, somebody said for changing gyms.
Yeah, it is.
Or I bet every trainer who changes gyms, I bet all their clients get a little bit of a boost.
Well, you can see when your clients tell you how stressed they are, and you're like, all right, let's try to do this, and then you're like, what's the cause of your stress? Well, there's this fucker in work where I have to look at this guy every day or girl, and I just want to kill them. And I'm like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah, and you're like, you can't take that person out for your client.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah.
And sometimes they're the block to you getting the result you need. So you just need to come up with so many other strategies to hedge against that. It's like, all right, well, if we can't get rid of this person who's ruining your life at work, I need you eating healthy so you can deal with that. Like, you might not need to eat as healthy if your work stress is good. It's like, you've always got to find it somewhere. But then there's, I guess in that sense, there is always another lever you can pull.
Well, one of my clients, Emma, who had on the podcast, she had a bad shoulder injury from a PT, like, ironically, who made her do a snatch where she has no like overhead.
Imagine that, like you pay someone for some expertise and they just injure you.
She had a horrible run. I got her on 4 trainers, and they just ruined her diet wise and exercise wise. But this guy tore her labrum or something crazy. And so she had that injury, but that was like, she would go into a certain stress response when she's stressed. But it would be like a protective nature where she's trying to protect.
Going back to the literal environment where it happened.
Yeah.
Happened in the gym, and then you're taking her back there, being like, "Nah, it'll feel good this time," and she's just got to trust you. And like, so much of it, have you ever had an injury where you just got to the point where you were anticipating the pain?
Yeah.
Fuck.
And so I sent her to Nigel, and he did all the tests. Said, "Look, your shoulder's fine. What's happening?" Like you said.
Oh, so it was that environment.
Well, it was
trauma,
just
maybe,
when she felt stress, obviously your nervous system and your sympathetic system fires up. And you might be more sensitive to pain signals, whatever that is. But then she protects her shoulder, and then within that, she's obviously not moving it around. And then that creates its own little like inflammatory response where you're not moving it.
Yeah.
Which is...
Well, that comes into that. Have you heard of John Kiley talks about like predictive coding as a way of like explaining placebo and stuff like that? It's like, to be efficient, that's what sort of placebo is. It's an adaptation, a survival adaptation to try to be efficient, for your physiology to be predictive in nature.
Yeah.
So predictive coding is where, like, say that she has that shoulder injury, so it just sends out like a, are you feeling pain signal? How does this area feel? And it gets the response, we're feeling pain. So it just programs that in like a computer. And if the signal always matches that, it'll never change it. And then sort of like what you need is like the new signal to break the code, like actually get them to move the shoulder.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, how do you actually have that moment to send a different signal back so that the brain will realize it and be like, oh, sweet, I can switch off that predictive coding. But I think I even explained it last time. It explains that thing of sort of before you even have your coffee, you're already sort of energized, and that's your body.
Predictable.
And that's how people get placeboed in tests and things like that. It's your body thinking something's happening and trying to save time and energy by being like, oh, we know this happens when you take this. But then sometimes it's like, hold on, where's the caffeine? And it turns out you just got some sugary beverage or something.
And sometimes it's the worst cue then with people like that, where you always ask them, like, how's your shoulder feel? Like, I was saying with people so back, like, stop asking them how their back feels all the time. Just get them moving well.
Well, even going back to that, like, predictive coding thing, and what you were talking about for programming individualization, because John Kiley's big thing is he's just like the periodization guru. And what he was saying is like one of the benefits of all this complex program individualization is it gives people something to believe in. If you believe you have this perfect, scientifically formulated program that's just designed to get you your result, there's going to be some predictive coding. If you get buy-in with people, their body's going to start making changes. It sounds crazy. And it's like, it's not everything. But is what that placebo effect is. Like, people will get results just from believing in that what they're doing is important. And then obviously that goes into the habit and shit like that.
Yeah, there's even...
So that's where the individualization, sometimes it's a bit of Kool-Aid, but the Kool-Aid's useful. The way John Kiley put it is because ethically I think it's a bit of a problem for some people, but he just says like, you're an agent of placebo, whether you like it or not. So, just try to wield it responsibly. And
what do you see exercise-wise where you probably say, well, a lot of people shouldn't do that? Because I was listening to Dr. Pat Davidson today, and he said most people, unless it's your sport, shouldn't overhead press. Because most people don't have that like range of motion in shoulders, which I thought was interesting. And then he referred to people that, I don't know if you've seen Seb or when he overhead presses.
It's a standing bench press.
Oh, it's a standing incline press. Like, you've just leant back. Now you might as well just have done it on the bench.
Yeah, like, right. There was no movement variability. And that's the thing. It's like people do two different exercises, but they do one movement.
Yeah.
And which is good for powerlifting, right? Because it's efficient. But then when you're trying to have a body that feels good, like, you kind of just need your body to bend in every different direction, ideally, to feel the best and to move the best.
So I was like, oh, okay.
I like, and like, that's definitely a thing, because sometimes as well, you got to realize that people just realizing how useless most people are. And they're like, look, just don't even go there. Like, a lot of people fuck people up when they get into the overhead pressing. I think the thing where most people go wrong, and I'm sure Pat would agree with this, is like, especially doing it standing. Like, and that's the gold standard of like functional movement or whatever you want to call it. But like, that's just such a challenging movement. Whereas if you let someone do it sitting down, heaps easier to control their center of mass. And then a lot of the movement options actually open up because they're not as compressed from just trying to resist gravity. When you're standing, your whole body tenses up to resist gravity. But when you tense up, you lose movement options. So if you sit someone on their ass, they don't have to tense up to resist gravity, because some people just shit at that. That's sort of the main issue with shitty posture. It just makes it less efficient to manage gravity. But then your body loosens up when you sit down, and then a lot of people can overhead press fine. You can make it even better if you just go one side at a time, because you can sort of borrow a bit of expansion or compression from the other side when you do it alternating activities for the Gen Pop when you're just trying to loosen them up. Mwah. I love it.
Like rows,
anything. So like when you're doing your lunges, whatever you're doing with your lower body, do the opposite with your upper body. You can look like a bit of a silly goose sometimes, but honestly, if you don't care what people think and you just want to loosen up, some of that stuff's amazing. Like, a lot of people really lose the ability to alternate, like from a coordination perspective in the gym. Like, a lot of the times in the gym, all our most stressful sort of stimuli, we're trying to do the whole same thing with our body, but human movement generally is pretty like contralateral, reciprocal in nature. Basically, is just a fancy way of saying doing opposite things with opposite ends of your body. So doing some things like that can be so beneficial. And like, more just, if you do it and you really suck at it, just do it for a bit. If you do it and you alternate, fine, you're probably not going to get much out of it. But some people, you just be shocked, even in your spine, right? We know there's meant to be all those alternating curves. What movement in the gym facilitates alternating curves? Every single movement in the gym is bending your back one way or bending it the other way. And if you do that, you flex your spine completely, extend your spine completely. That's movement variability in a sense. But if you look at like how a spine's meant to move, obviously it wasn't designed, but how it evolved to sort of move is those alternating curves, they also then help you alternate with your limbs and things like that. So, you know, those floor cogs, that getting those alternating curves going, like that's money for Gen Pop. That makes people feel so good.
Even like seated row where it has individual cables alternating, you get way more range of motion with your shoulders.
Just pumping.
Cracks clicking, obliques firing, everything going.
Yeah.
So I suppose training wise, from the people who are giving out real good information such as yourself, is going training for me, what I used to think about back in the days, like just training muscle simulation, okay, get people to lose fat. But now it's like you're saying, it's like, how can we get people to kind of mimic our normal gait, which is the normal way we move, to just improve their function real life, which is like, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I don't know why we weren't doing that. But it challenges a lot of the stuff that we used to think when we think like the pinnacle is getting people squatting and deadlifting, and it's like, it's very challenging when you're thinking of that way.
Yeah, it's just becoming a bit more sophisticated now, where it's like we can get people all the benefits of that stuff, but then without some of the negatives that you get from turning the Gen Pop into a powerlifter. Because a lot of Gen Pop, when they get into powerlifting, it's the best thing that's ever happened to them. Bone density goes up, build a little bit more muscle, their hormone profile probably gets better. All those things are really helpful. And then at a certain point, you get really good at powerlifting, and that's when you're less good at being a human. And like for some people, it's worth it. Some people don't give a shit about being in pain when they're walking around. They don't want to. So not that every powerlifter's in pain, but you know what I mean. You can really push those sports, and a lot of people don't even get good, and they try so hard in those sports they just screw themselves up.
I did a course with Ed Cohen. Every one of his, like the guys that must have been 50, 60 hip replacements. Knee.
He got paid though, at least. A lot of people grind out those hip sockets and they don't even get paid.
Fucking Instagram video.
And it's like, if you're going to the Olympics, like I'm here for you. I'm here to help people grind themselves out to make it into the Olympics. But if you're not getting paid, or it's not like your whole life. It's you want a better deal than that.
Like my old mindset would be like, just keep putting weight in the back, keep putting. But now I'm
stimulus, progressive overload.
You know what? I don't think lifting that amount of weight is actually good on your body, your ligaments.
But we didn't know how to do anything else. We didn't know how to make people feel better outside of the gym. So now I think we're not compensating. We're like, I got to turn everyone into like an IFBB pro or like a semi-professional powerlifter. It's like, you can actually just try to make them a more efficient human being.
You don't have to do those particular moves. Because even I remember looking at certain clients where I'd be like, I don't know why their hip is kind of shifting at the bottom of a squat, or I don't know why their knees keep collapsing. 30
joints in the foot. You don't know any of them. You don't know the rib cage exists. You're like, why is their back all wonky? Like, I'm doing their thoracic extensions.
Yeah, but then you'll get a person with perfect anatomy for a squat who'll come in and make it look
and
beautiful.
Think you're
and
a
I'm
king.
like, okay, there we go.
Yeah, the
now
system works.
Make everyone else like this, which never happens. But yeah,
Will Berkman was saying that he coached some chick he coached a female powerlifter to break a few like unofficial world records, and I think it was like her first year of powerlifting, and he was like, man, I'm just such a ripper. He genuinely is a ripper coach, like super smart guy. But then she went and did a bodybuilding show, and like first bodybuilding show she like won the open division and stuff like that. Just like crazy elite genetics and elite work ethic. And sometimes you just get your hands on those people, and like I said, makes you feel amazing.
That's why even with body transformation, same way, you can't get too hung up when you get just someone that's going to do everything you say. Like, you can't go, I've made it, now I'm the king.
You got to enjoy it from a like, this is why you do it, to get those people who listen to you. And it's so validating for them. You have the information that they can apply for that situation perfectly, but then you might have someone else who gets no results as well. You're like, doesn't make you. But so what we're talking about, the single doing stuff alternately, matches kind of gait or the way we evolved and stuff like that. Same way with split squats, someone's like split squats and that kind of work it mimics more how we move naturally outside of the gym,
putting your hips in that position.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't even realize that the two parts of your pelvis, there's three parts of it. You got your two ilia, the two hip bones on either side, then you got this wedge-shaped sacrum stuck in the middle of them, and you got your SI joint, which it only moves like 2 to 6 degrees, but then how that affects the volume in the overall like pelvic cavity, I guess you could call it, like that's cubed, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a fair bit of volume increase and decrease. And it's also like, when you look at the shape of the SI joint, you can kind of see how the pelvis is meant to sort of go like that when we walk. If you're looking at the YouTube, it's just meant to alternate as one half of it adducts, internally rotates and extends, the other half opens up. And that's sort of, again, and that's a lot of people, if you can't do one of those, if you just try to do the opposite on the other side, that's what can sort of help you reclaim some of those positions. So that's the thing, if you think about like what a squat looks like, if you had one knee coming in and the other one going out, that probably is a horrible idea. But if you get really, really good at bilateral squats, your pelvis is probably going to be better at doing the same thing with both sides than it is at alternating. And then that's when things at that point start to get a little bit like, I hope you like powerlifting at that point. Yeah,
because even an easy example would be...
Not that it's permanent.
No, easy example would be Louise, where like, probably from looking on Instagram, among other things, or just having a driven goal in regards weight. She wanted to squat.
Yeah, she's there to put in work,
she wanted to squat heavy, so her original goal was like 100, or whatever. But the problem with her, and you could agree, is when someone has to squat heavy, they're doing it in maybe some kind of extension, because that's probably they're in their strongest position.
What's the stress? You're putting them under a lot of stress.
Stress. She's sitting down all day. Her back was starting to hurt a little bit. I said, look, we can either push on and try to get your squat. She hit 100. She just wanted to keep squatting heavy like every week.
But it was worth it to her. She was like, this is hurting me. I'm aware of that, but I really want this. It's meaningful to me.
But then she wanted to keep going. She's like, I want to keep squatting. Right. I said, look, here's the trade-off. If I'm going to do your program, there's a risk you might like either hurt your back muscle, or like whatever, or jam your hip up or something. Or we can go and we can do this different type of squat variation for a few weeks. Let's do some opposite stuff like you were saying. And then we come back to it. And she's like, nah. Anyway, end up jamming our hip flexor up and sore back, whatever. Now we've got back around to be able to do those movements. But it's just it's a interesting trade-off, like you were saying.
And how, like, what you were trying to sell was like a more indirect path that would have got her there quicker, because it just would have respected her health a little bit more. And just, you can build up the leg size and stuff required to squat 100 kilos. And then it's like, all right, we've got the muscle now, we've got the strength on the side to side. Now we just need to work on the skill of squatting. And I know that 100 kilo squat's there. It's not the way to squat a world record, but it's a good way for the Gen Pop to sort of chase down their strength goals, or just like, all right, I'll do my bilateral squats for like 4 weeks, and then I'll just do 2 weeks where I focus on split squats. So I'm not just like ramming down that same path over and over and over again. Because like I said, it's just about fun. It's just finding the sweet spot for you, I guess.
So for you now, you might have most people do bilateral movements. Again,
I got a weightlifting team, so like most of my guys, I don't really back squat any of my weightlifters because it's not a competition movement. And like, especially with my guys, they have to be able to get into a deep squat and put their arms up above their head. So you really don't want to be compressing the back of the rib cage, because that limits both hip flexion and shoulder flexion. So you actually surprisingly want like a decent amount of curvature in the thoracic spine, so you have something to sort of expand and get your arms up above your head and sink down into a squat without just falling forward on your face.
So what do CrossFit people or Olympic lifters do when like a tall person walks into the gym that isn't perfectly anatomical to drop ass to grass?
Oh my god, there's so many different things. Like,
it must
you
be
have a chat to them and be like, do you give a shit about being good at this sport? Like,
yeah.
That's all.
Because if you look at the people that win CrossFit, like, they're generally probably my size with the same limb length and just can drop straight down. It's never a...
Yeah, you do see
to be a good
outliers.
Olympic lifter as well, like obviously, but to be both.
They're always freak athletes, any lanky guy that gets into CrossFit. But yeah, then with those other people, if they're not a freak athlete and they're tall, it's just about managing expectations.
Yeah.
And then they are going to look different when they do it than people who are built for the sport, because one of the issues with weightlifting is a very dogmatic technical model that's developed from all these countries who look for the perfect weightlifters, and then they throw this dogmatic system being like, there's one way to lift, and that really works when you've got talent recruitment like that, where you're finding the perfect people. When you've just got all different kinds of shaped people coming at you, that's when you have to be a bit more flexible in your technical model. And that's sort of one of the big things I'm sort of developing now, working with coaches to be like, what are the people look like who are going to be the best at the sport that you instruct, but what are the people that are actually in front of you, and how can you develop your technical model to help those people, not just in the way, because the woke thing for coaches now is to not be married to the technical model. And they're like, okay, I'm open to there being more than one way of doing this. Here's just my ideal way. One step better than that is having just two accepted ways that are almost a little bit opposite in their strategy. But like, I know there's two different approaches to these things. So instead of just making allowances in your technical model for people, you can actually facilitate. It's like, I know what you look like. I know this is going to feel good for you. I know the traditional way is not going to work for people who look like this, have a rib cage shaped like this, or
you could call that individualization.
Yeah, that's where I want to see the individualization in the technique, maybe more so than the programming.
The movements that the person is doing.
Yeah, just like, so for example, some people are going to lean forward a lot more in their back squats. Again, those people probably shouldn't back squat if they're just gen pop. But if you do powerlifting, you're going to have someone who's not built for back squatting, but you've got to get them to back
Norton
squat.
Gets abused online where I don't know.
Powerlifting squats, it's not a beauty pageant. I think that's what some people forget. And like, people hate the big arches in bench press, and it's like, well, they don't pay you extra to bench press more inches. Yeah. Like, until it's a ROM competition, you're not really going to see many sexy looking lifts.
But that's just his structure. That, like,
yeah, he's got long legs.
Yeah, so he's just going to look like a deadlift, but he gets abused.
How big's the chip on his shoulder? Because that whole powerlifting career started because at his first bodybuilding comp, someone was like, you got crap legs. He was like, I'll show you. And then he dedicated the rest of his life to powerlifting just to stick it to that guy. Did genuinely squat a world record. He's had probably the smallest quads for anyone who's ever squatted a world record, which was hilarious.
That just shows that it's annoying. He annoys me. He puts out good info, but I always unfollow him. When I unfollow him, I have like...
It's tough. He got bullied when he's young.
I think it's shown. He needs to like deal with that first, because it comes out too much.
I see it in myself. I got bullied when I was younger. You see other people who've been bullied and how they react online, and you're like, you can't be like that.
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it?
You just got to take a few deep breaths. Like, sometimes I forget you can just put the phone down and go surfing. I went on a holiday recently. It's just good just talking shit on the Instagram stories about, all right, I know everyone's going to be real mad about this. I'm just going to go for a surf for about 3 hours and not reply to anyone. Life-changing.
Yeah, now you're putting it in now. But again, that's a trade-off. You don't have kids. You're seeing, like, you can do that for now, but it's a fine line. But even doing stuff surfing is, you're trying to train yourself to not get that itch to look at your phone again. Like, when you're walking back to check your phone and you're getting like, the anticipation, like, it's probably not healthy.
The gym used to be like that. Hey, it was a break from your phone, but then the phone just became a part of it. But then even now, man, like, surfing's so wholesome. It's out there in nature. But then, because I'm doing this surfing fundamentals program, you know those people who just want to monetize every hobby they have? So I'm out there with a GoPro hanging out of my goddamn mouth. It's cool. It's not that invasive. I'm just trying to, like, share the experience with people. Get people into surfing. Because I do think it's something that's so beautiful. Like, you're out in nature, doing a sport, it's outdoors. Whereas the gym was just me staring at my phone.
But sometimes I'll get annoyed at myself. I go outdoors, but then I'm like, I'm doing a story, so I'm kind of just like, fucking, you're balancing it out because you're
trying to show people how to live the life.
I'm like, fuck, I've just done this story about 10 times. Half an hour later, but yeah, that's the trade-off.
It's just a journey.
But the more you can do stuff, where you're practicing to be away from your phone, I think that will help.
I'm so lucky I have the surfing, because especially now I'm trying to post content every day and just interacting with online clients. It does marry you to your phone, so you have to have some things where you can't have your phone, I think. Because I think it's reasonable for me to always want to be near my phone when I'm on land. Like, it's my main source of income and things like that. So it's like, it's tough. You can't just throw the phone away. Everyone loves to romanticize it. Like, no, just one quick scroll and then put it down, only 5 minutes a day or whatever. But like, you got to live in the real world. It's like telling people to not eat junk food.
Yeah, once you're probably following good people and then not just sitting there scrolling, at least if you're actually replying to people or thinking about posts.
I only reply to people that call me out.
Yeah.
We discussed. No, I shouldn't say that. But yeah. Wait, what did you say before that? There was some just before that. Oh yeah, curating your Instagram feed. Yeah, that's the thing. People whinge about what they see on Instagram, but it's just looking into the mirror.
Yeah. And then if Instagram's obviously so smart with the algorithm, like if you click on a few posts, it will suggest you in the homepage. But one of my clients told me, because funny,
it knows what part of the screen your eyes are looking at.
Is it? That's just the way by click. What?
No, because it's got, how the front cam's got like 3 of them now. It's like they also the apps take advantage of that too. That I was like shocked by that.
Yeah, well, the homepage, it will suggest whatever you're looking at. So if you're always looking at chicks, it will just select heaps of chicks, and then
Let's do a test.
Yeah, we'll have a look.
I bet your mine will be mostly surfing and weightlifting.
Now mine's UFC. It was a lot of girls in bikinis.
I get a bit of UFC.
But one of my gay clients...
Hey, look at that. I'm the man. Look at that. Only surfing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. See, and that's the thing. People say that you can't avoid the bullshit. You can. What? Surfing, rugby, surfing, UFC, meme.
Wow. Yeah, mine's just all UFC.
Yeah, see?
But then the problem is Jake Paul pops up now because he's fucking...
Yeah, other stuff sort of comes into it. Who did he knock out? Ben Askren. That was so intense.
He's fighting Woodley.
I think he might win.
But one of my gay clients, he fell into this trap before, and obviously you're getting all these gay pages, hot guys in just wearing nothing. But he said and that was on mine for a bit, it was just heaps of chicks. But if you hold your finger on it, click not interested, it will go away.
Oh, that's a direct path to the advertisers.
Yeah, and then it will give you, like, curate a new kind of thing for you. But
so you can give stuff to flick if you like.
Yeah,
that's really
that's
not
the
good.
whole thing, yeah. So that's one way to curate it. But going back even your own training now, how's that influenced? Because obviously you were a weightlifter.
Full confession, I kind of quit lifting weights the last 12 months.
Really?
Well, I was just getting back into surfing, and like surfing, especially progressive surfing, can be quite hard on the knees. And I was just like, if I blew out my knee weightlifting, not that I've ever blown out my knee bad, I'd be a little bit dirty if I didn't hit some of my goals in surfing. I just wanted to be able to do a few airs and shit. But now I've accomplished some of what I wanted to do in surfing, just from a learning new tricks perspective. So now I'm going to try to find that balance again. So
what's kind of some of the, I don't know, what's the S&C world in surfing? Is it relatively new? Or?
It's popping off because of the Olympics. It's
oh yeah, I'm just letting everything in the Olympics these days.
Yeah. Well, the Olympics should probably.
It's a breakdancing
in Japan. I think it was like 83% of the general public don't want to host it or something.
Oh,
yeah, they're like no, which I completely understand. Like I want to see an Olympics, not in my country though.
Yeah. So surfing, S&C world.
It's a bit of chaos as you can expect because like S&C is kind of like the last thing to sort of arrive at every sport. But now because it's in the Olympics, I guess maybe there's a bit more government funding and there's a bit more research being done. It's kind of been centralized a little bit, which can be handy. Just get all the thinking people sort of in the one space. But then there's just so much like hippie culture sort of attached to surfing and everyone's doing the bulletproof coffee. So we're kind of going through that phase. Like nutritionally, surfing is exactly where CrossFit was when it first came out. Like carbs are bad and we've got to eat heaps of nuts so we can lose weight. Not that obviously surfers are mostly skinny and things like that. But so that's the thing. You've got like skinny surfers and then you've got people who are trying to get in surfing shape following their advice. And that's where there's a little bit of a disconnect. But it's the same as what the MMA fighters were doing.
So surfing kind of the same as ninja warrior, the fact that like you want a high body to weight strength curve? Or
basically, you just want to have like movement options. So you just want to be really mobile and you also want to have a good base of support. So in your feet, you want to have like really being able to use your whole foot. Which might be a bit of a foreign term to a lot of people, but a lot of people, you'd know from this Gary Wall course, people be surprised just what parts of their foot never touch the ground. And you need all the parts of your foot to touch the ground to be able to rotate your tibia on top of that, and then to rotate the next bone up, which is your femur, and then to rotate the hip on top of. Like whenever you're standing up, like it all just sort of comes from the bottom up. So maintaining your feet and things like that can be really helpful for surfers because a lot of the stretching people do laying down, but then if you can't perform those same movements standing on your own 2 feet, the flexibility doesn't mean anything. So it's about your ability to self-organize within your base of support. So the organization is like the rib cage, but then the base of support and the head, and then the base of support is just the foot, like what parts of that you can actually put pressure through.
But how are surfers' feet then? Because they're barefoot a lot of the time.
If you actually surf a lot, their feet, usually there's no dramas. The issue is with people who only surf on weekends. All the surfers who are good, they don't have issues. It's the people who suck at surfing. It's like working out. So what's the difference? What are they not getting that the pro surfers are? And pro surfers are just walking around on a beach barefoot all day. Whereas then you got old mate who's got his $1 million penthouse in the eastern suburbs, likes to surf on a weekend, works at an investment bank wearing bloody wingtip shoes with a heel in them and like a heap stiff sole all week, all his toes being smushed in. So his foot doesn't bend like it should. But he does yoga classes, but then he's like, why can't I get into all these positions laying down, but then it doesn't carry over to my surfing? So just all that sort of sides of things.
Well, I was listening, Lex Friedman, that
the futurologist.
They had this guy, Brett Weinstein, on it, and he's a professor of biology at Stanford, one of those.
Yeah.
But
is he the one with the telomeres and the rats?
No, he's the one that told him, was on Joe Rogan, he said some medication that was real good for COVID has like 85% success rate, but then got pulled off YouTube. Ivermectin.
No, he was on. It was either him or his brother discovered something about rats.
Yeah, they're both very smart. But Lex Friedman asked, what's your advice to 20-year-olds? Because he's a professor. He said it wouldn't necessarily be to keep studying, but it would be more to like find... You might just do the random course you're not going to do, because you never know how handy it's going to come in later on. So he used the example of someone's going to do like a robotics course. It might necessarily be you're going to be successful in that, because there's always going to be someone smarter. Yeah. But it may just be like you may have been a carpenter before and you do the robotics course. So it's like those random niches that meet that you thought would never meet together. So you're talking about like you're surfing and then matching your knowledge of the feet, mechanics, and you're like, oh, okay, this is a nice niche.
Crazy how it all comes
together.
Well,
that's the thing. He's like, could be a random course you've done years ago, and now suddenly you're going to use it, and now you've found that little crossroads that you're unique at.
Yeah, well, that's why also like, and it's a bit of nepotism, but you see it in the Australian corporate scene, all those ex-rugby boys getting these amazing jobs, and you're like, how do they get such good gigs? But people just want people who've had a bit of life experience. It's a bit of cliche, but you just know some people have dealt with some shit and they'll have some transferable skills. Anyone who's been like really good at one thing, it's like probably decent at a few things because they've had a principled sort of driven approach.
So even with the feet, like you're talking about, it's such an interesting topic. Like,
I really like getting into the foot stuff.
First of all, how crazy certain shoes are that ruin people's feet. Yeah. So I'll use the example. My dad, who'd been training, he had like an injury on his leg before. Obviously, the way it's been compensated over the last few years, where he's like started to walk on the outside of his foot. All right. Because he's doing that so much, I started training him. Weren't getting much responses. So let's take off your shoe. His fucking foot is just like a claw.
Yeah.
And so it's just crunched up. So there's no, like, when he walks, he's not pushing off the midfoot.
Yeah.
Toe. His toe joint is like stiff as anything. He can't even move it.
Oh, crazy.
So I've got him to get like those toe spreaders. He's wearing them. His movement's like brilliant already. But like...
This just feels good, eh?
But just to think... Nigel even said it before. Shoes are the worst. Now... The problem is when we used to always slag Thingo that wear the 5-finger shoes, I'm like, maybe he was ahead of the game.
There's something to both, because there's something to be said for not being neurotic. Like, I think, and you'd agree with this, there's so much that you're aware of with the human body, like so much can be going wrong, but you're still alive, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also, on the other side of that, there's so many little 1%ers to gain, and I think there's a lot of those 1%ers in the foot. So if you're having some dramas, it's always a great place to look. Like if that first point of contact with the ground, especially because it's such a sensory rich environment, your body's getting so much of its information from touching things.
But yeah, as you said, how many things can go wrong then if your foot isn't moving properly?
And bits of it hasn't touched the ground, no sensory information. And like every single one of those joints in your foot, it bending corresponds with a joint action further up the chain. So if those aren't bending as well, it's going to make it harder for the things up the chain to bend unless you're sitting down. And people always want to exercise standing up because everyone wants to be a bloody athlete. So either exercise sitting down or learn to use your whole foot.
Or do both. Like
people are so afraid of letting that arch hit the ground. How good does it feel when you get people to do it though? If you can get their body to sort of accept it.
The old way, not the old way, it's probably still taught, but like in regards to squatting, made famous by Supper Leopard.
Kelly Starrett.
Where he's like, you're obviously knees out, and then you're like, your feet are eversion, is it when you're on the outside?
So ankle eversion is a pronation mechanic. But it's like, that's where people get all their pronation, just the heel rolling in. Like the midfoot and the forefoot doesn't open up, so they just all just fold in.
But when people are pushing the knees out, all the weight, there was none on the midfoot or like big toe. It was all on the outside. Yeah. So then, you're just stuffing up your mechanics. Everything you do, step ups, lunges, it's all about.
There's no variability. Like again, you do all your lunges and you do all your squats and you do all your things. You try to make it look like one exercise, and people like it because they get more weight on the bar. So they're like, oh, it must be good technique because it's improving the amount of weight I can get on the bar. It's because you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. You're getting really good at it.
But what way is that foot supposed to, like when we walk, or even like when you squat and stuff, where's the weight supposed to go in that gait walking cycle?
Depends who's listening as to how I answer that
No,
question. We're going simple.
No, you're simple, yeah.
Try to keep it over.
You don't have to keep
try to keep it over the middle of your foot. You want to feel the outside. This is a perfect world. Don't freak out if you lose some of these. But in a perfect world, you'd have pressure through the outside edge of your heel, and then your pinky toe, and then the inside edge of the ball of your foot, and then the pad of your big toe as well. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to be pushing or grabbing at the ground. You just want to sense them on the ground, even pressure, and try to maintain that throughout the full range of motion. Your weight will naturally shift around, your feet will internally, externally rotate, but if you just focus on maintaining that balance, bend your knees and hips, and letting the foot move, not trying to keep it in its position, just letting it do its thing and letting your body self-organize, good things will happen. A lot of people, when they get into the complexities, they're really trying to make things happen. It's more just about not trying to avoid any movements.
But even what we're talking about is obviously like we want our foot to move properly, so our knee and hip joints, they're moving properly. And if someone may have restrictions or they're not moving properly at the foot, the knee might get pain in the knee or the hips, and kind of it's probably a frustration when we look at, like, we could talk about this for hours, but even like a lot of physiotherapists that we'll see, if you get, okay, your back sore, okay, let's just come in, we're going to rub your back, you're going to feel better. We won't even get started on chiros. That's just a different ball game altogether. But we'd localize, okay, let's do that. But then they might miss, well, the reason your foot isn't pronating properly, and then that's just causing everything else to stiffen up to create that shock absorber.
The pronation and back pain one is such a big one because it's like that pronation is how you put force into the ground. And then, so if your body can't get it there, it would just try to put force into the ground using something else. Mm-hmm. So if your foot doesn't move, like, foot pronation is like your body like rotating in towards your midline. Whereas you can kind of do that at the lower back. Like when people have that big Kardashian ass, some people refer to it as, big anterior pelvic tilt posture. It's not bad because heaps of people have anterior pelvic tilt and are really athletic. But that's your body trying to use the lower back to push force into the ground. Yeah. So some people's backs just don't like that, or there's just a certain amount of it that they go beyond that then becomes intolerable. And because they just do everything like that, and they refuse to let their foot push into the ground properly, they're just doing extra at the lower back. It's just robbing Peter to pay Paul. Because that's it. People always are trying to avoid force on their joints. It's got to go somewhere. Like people are always trying to be like, how do I protect my knees? It's like, what are you thrashing at the expense of your knees? Because you want to use the big weight. They're like, yeah, I want to use a big weight, but I want to save my knees. I'm like, well, you just need you just need the whole thing to be strong. Yeah. You can't be saving bits of your body because something has to get punished. It's just physics.
Yeah, then obviously then there was a stage where people go, okay, let's strengthen up your VMO or your glutes, but then as you start to learn,
and it was close, right?
No, yeah, you're
the
not
idea
far
of
off.
Like doing things that don't normally get worked is it's a good concept. They just kind of
my old mentor Damien said this to me 6 years ago at this stage. He said, if you're not like pushing off the midfoot ball of your toe, like you're not gonna like quote unquote activate your glutes.
That's some good shit.
And I was like, geez, so you're not gonna hit your VMO or like your glutes as you push off your mid stance. Like walk.
It's got to be a complete picture, and that's where people get confused, just like zooming in on the glute too much, and not having a look at how does the whole lower limb work. But that's why people feel their glutes so much in hip thrusts. It's like you don't have to tense up other bits just to fight gravity. So again, hip thrusts are like really good glute exercise just because people don't have to worry about their posture or anything like that. You just lay down on the ground and squeeze your butt with a heavy weight.
But then I was even looking at Dave O'Sullivan where he was like trying to secure the hip thrust where you're driving for your heels because it doesn't correlate with how you walk. Focus more on pushing with your midfoot. Yeah,
juice that orange.
I even got people just get your heel off the ground, push your midfoot, and it's a good burn. Yeah,
because what that is a lot as well. Like, why bringing people back to the midfoot feels so good is we talk about people being forward, and you're like, well, wouldn't we bring them back to the heels? It's like most people are on their toes, so just bringing them back to the midfoot, that alone is bringing them back. It's doing a double. It's teaching them how to put force into the ground more efficiently, and it's just getting some expansion in the back of that rib cage because they're not compressed and forward all the time. So for a lot of people, you've got to pull them back and teach them those mid-stance sort of qualities before you try to pull them back all the way and get them into their heels. There's this big misconception that unathletic people or people who lift too much heavy weights are like stuck in their heels. Never. It just looks like it. They're stuck in their toes. No one's ever stuck in their heels. That's where like movement starts. That's what your movement options, right? If your heel never hits the ground because your weight's shifted forward, you only have half your foot to use. Remember, we were talking about being able to use that whole base of support.
Yeah.
That's why shifting your weight back opens up mobility options, because it allows you to start at the back of your foot and move all the way to the front of the foot. People get compressed at the back, shift their weight forward, and they can only use the front of the foot, and then that's how they lose their base of support. Massive oversimplification.
No, it's good. But even it applies to, I'll train some people that are like triathletes or whatever, and I'll do some of the calf and foot exercises to promote what we're talking about.
Yeah, because cycling shoes would be a beast.
Well, that's the other thing that we obviously talked about, shoes, especially tight ones that crumple your feet up and then completely mess that up. My old mentor used to actually get people's shoes and you can see where they're worn out by where they're walking on, which is nuts.
Was he one of those crazy people who's like modifying people's shoes for him as well? People get into that.
He was talking about the toe spreaders back then.
Carving foam off it in certain spots.
Where they it's a G-pole. But it's interesting even with weightlifting then, like if you look where people are always wearing squash shoes all the time, completely masking what may be some kind of limitation there in the foot and ankle.
Yeah, and that's the thing where like for the sport of weightlifting it's fine, but then with Gen Pop and stuff like that, it's like it might be a bit too much for some people, because again, all those people who are professional weightlifters, they're probably just in their shoes for training and then living a normal life, or they're just super athletes so they can tolerate being more banged up and still move well. But then for Gen Pop, I have been not forcing. All my lifters, they just wear what they want, like what they feel best in. A lot of them now are more comfortable weightlifting in joggers because they don't actually need the heel elevation, because their forefoot opens up more, so they can still have good ankle mobility and they don't need to compensate with that big heel wedge. Not that it's bad to use a heel wedge, because it's just an easy solution, but like I said, it's just good to know that you don't have to buy weightlifting shoes to have that ankle mobility. You just need to learn it to get better at shifting your center of mass back. Keeping your center of mass shifted back as you bend your hips and knees, not falling forward in that squat.
Would you do even stuff where you're just getting people in barefoot and then you might do some of the calf or foot exercises?
Exactly.
Just without shoes, as you said.
So the ones who like it, let them do the competition lifts in the shoes, because it makes the good noises on the platform and stuff like that. That hard sole makes that loud crack sound in the turnover, which is something about weightlifting that I really enjoy. And that's the thing. It's like people enjoy the shoes. People want to buy all the equipment and stuff like that. So then it's just for your accessories, do some split squats.
I think that's what what you're saying. Talking about barbell squats, do something that's going to counteract it the same way. Shoes, do some stuff, warm ups, whatever, barefoot. So you have that variability in that part.
Yeah, it's like how many different movements can you stick in a program before you've just watered down the specificity too much? You just want to find that point where they're still ticking away, making nice progress towards their actual goal, but just as a nice marching pace, and then fill the rest of the program generally with just general physical preparation.
Well, I'll tell you, coming back to that, because I went too much, played sports my whole life, Gaelic football. It's a pretty like explosive sprinting sport. Took a few years off that, never got injured my whole life, maybe one or two niggles here and there. Went back to Gaelic football like after time off this year and last year. 2 injuries on the trot, like from sprinting, just exactly like you're saying. Why? Because I haven't been fucking sprinting, like I haven't been exposing myself to that.
Have you seen the sprinters that David Gray shares as well, when he shows them in slow-mo, how much their thorax is moving around?
Really?
Everyone talks about like, oh, Usain Bolt, he would have run faster if he kept his core stiff. It's like, that's where he's getting all his momentum from. Like athletes actually have really supple rib cages and pelvis. The stiffness is in the limbs. Like, and even you look at throwers, right? The thorax is the thing that's moving. The limb is the thing that's staying stiff to transfer force into the implement that you're trying to throw. So people have some real whack misconceptions about like what's meant to move and what's not meant to move in an athletic context when you're trying to produce a lot of force. Because in the gym, all of a sudden, it's the opposite. You got the big weight on you. So all of a sudden, stiffen up the thorax and all the movements about the limbs. But knees and elbows don't really like moving much under the highest loads. You can teach them to do it, but that's why so many people have knee and elbow dramas from heavy slow lifting.
Yeah. But even what you're talking about with specificity is like, we're not saying don't go away from your sport.
Just do it all.
Well, I made the opposite mistake. What I'm saying is like, I wasn't specific enough. I wasn't sprinting enough, which is why I'm picked up more injuries now, because when I went back up.
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, increase my squat, put more force into the ground, get stronger, and then make it quicker.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's like
obviously too much
bit more
stuff.
complicated.
Yeah, you need a nice balance.
Because that's the thing, people can usually squat in the off season. Like, you let them back squat for 3 months. Good athletes can get so much stronger in that phase, and they're probably not going to stiffen up that quick. And then you just get them off it before they stiffen up, and by that time the squat gain's probably slowing down anyway.
What's your opinion? We see people releasing like mobility guides, and
it's just that Corona hustle, isn't it?
Well, I think it's the same with people where that may have worked for them to get, we can say, more mobility, like end range in the joint, but like,
no, it's just mobile. Look, typically it's just mobile people selling mobility programs.
Yeah.
There are some genuine people who've worked into it, or it's just like people sell a mobility program, but it's just like, well, hold on, you spent 10 years stretching and like you were stiff, but you didn't just do that. And like some people are real honest about their claims. They're like, you gotta fucking work for it. I know you like me and you see me, you look up to my flexibility and stuff like that. But yeah, like with powerlifting, right? It's powerlifters who are being like, look at what you can do if you come do powerlifting. And then you got a bunch of really sexy, flexible people being like, look at what you can be if you download my mobility manual. And they're just like...
But it's an interesting topic where you might look at mobility, but then someone may be very weak in that position. Yeah. Okay, you can do all the mobility you want. Your brain's not going to give you that position to go in.
Yeah.
Because those muscles aren't strong enough to support it. So again, it's probably just people that are just unaware of what they don't know as well. But it's an interesting topic, isn't it? When you look at mobility, flexibility, for some people that may be good, but again, your weakness may be causing your lack of mobility or flexibility.
If you're ever doing something specific to your goals and it's not working, try doing the literal opposite, and every now and then you'll get what you want. Like some people are heaps stiff, and then they're stretching, they're just never getting any more mobile, and then all of a sudden you get them stronger, and all of a sudden they loosen up. You're like, that was weird. Sometimes that's just the way it is, and then vice versa. Sometimes people are like, they're really big and strong and stiff, but they're just not hitting any PRs. And it's like, well, their just movement's gone to shit a little bit too much.
Yeah,
you got to move them well. It's a bit less specific. All of a sudden, they just feel better and they can get back to that hard training. So it just goes both. It's so weird and counterintuitive sometimes.
It goes back to what you're talking about even originally, where
the
your nervous
poison
system
and
and
the
stuff.
cure are the same thing.
Yeah. Generally, you could probably say the way I see it is like most guys that are pretty strong probably need more mobility and certain flexibility work, and then the girls doing all the stretching need all the like the strength work and stability work.
Yeah, typically. Yeah,
typically.
It's getting better these days. I feel like people are more aware of it.
Even I put that up on my Instagram and I had a few people message me, I've been trying to stretch for years, then suddenly I've started to do some strength work and everything's loosened up.
Well, that's the thing. It's like giving yourself some variability. It's like you think you're tense. It's like put a weight on you. Then you're really tense and then you'll relax after you take that off. It's all relativity, right?
So what are you doing with your clients now? Have you changed your stance on mobility, flexibility? Still give them some stretching? Do you give them some mobility?
Probably so much of it is just trying to meet people where they're at and things like that. Like I just dish it out as needed. Some of my clients have super extensive warm-ups, and some of that's just because of things that they've come to me with extensive routines, and I'm just being like, I'm just going to try to sprinkle in a bit of my stuff, take away a bit of that stuff, but then like they're still really attached to those long warm-ups, so you've got to facilitate that a little bit for them. But generally speaking, just trying to do like one or two things to raise core temp and then just get people in there. Whereas, I don't know, I like just exploring my body and stuff like that. And then for some people, I was probably just putting a little bit too much of that exploration sort of stuff in there. But that's the benefits of microdosing in programming.
I've got into not into it, but just there's a lot more people in there doing like functional range conditioning.
See, that stuff is just like, because you heaps tensed up when you're doing it. Like, and it's good because it's like, it is giving you variability in terms of like your movements and stuff like that, but it's not giving you variability in terms of your sympathetic tone. And like, that's where I think the breathing drills in combination with training through a full range, like that's when it's a bit more comprehensive.
Well, like you said, you might do that, the 90-90 drills, you're bringing your hips over. Gramos used to do it, where you're sitting down.
Oh, the alternating things. Yeah, they rip.
But then you go, okay, then for some that may improve the rotation and external rotation, but then for you it mightn't, and you just need to do something else and that will improve it. It's
most people with their rotation, it's just like I said, just managing that sagittal plane. Like if you can just spend most of your time just pushing people forward or pulling them back. The side-to-side differences and their ability to internally and externally rotate all get freed up when you improve their sagittal plane. Because the sagittal plane is just how you resist gravity, right? And if that's fucked, you just got to stiffen up, so you're going to have no movement options. If you can just get someone to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and balance a little bit better, they're just going to loosen up automatically.
And even a lot of, as we said, that single leg work will still improves that anyway.
Most of the time. The only issue is like a lot of people try to load the single leg work too early.
Okay.
And people just end up doing it like a back squat. Like they'll really stiffen up at the back.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So if you're doing heavy back squats, you don't want to do like super heavy lunges. Well, you'd want to do it as heavy as you can without making the same extended shape with your thorax. Try to hold the weight out in front of you, shift your rib cage back relative to your limbs, and then do it like that. And then that's actually a different exercise.
Where do you think you'll be now in a few years? What do you think your thought process on training will be now? Do you think you're going to go the opposite way where you're at? Or it's obviously ever evolving.
It's just, yeah, I'd like to hope there won't be too many dramatic departures from what I'm doing. I feel really comfortable with what I'm doing now. Like, I feel like I'm in a nice spot where I can help people pursue the unhealthy aspects of sport when they want to double down on performance. But I'm also here for those people that just want a taste of the weightlifting life or the CrossFit life, but they don't want to sacrifice their health. They want a good deal for those PRs and things like that. So hopefully just continuing to learn about a more holistic approach and just filling in the blanks and things like that.
But your training isn't necessarily a system like CrossFit. It's like,
no,
let's just look who's coming the door and just getting them.
I'm trying to work on that though, because I want to be able to do the elevator pitch. It's such a cop out when someone's like, what do you do to people? I'm like, it's just good training. Yeah. Because that's a bit of a bullshit answer. Yeah. It's what everyone wants to say, but deep down it's like everyone should have a thing that they do. Be somewhat of a generalist, and then
I know
bring some of yourself to it. And I guess that's the thing. Like for most S&C coaches, I'm a bit more focused on the Olympic lifts, and I do like integrating them because I think like a lot of people were married to the Olympic lifts and things like that, and then recently has been a big departure in S&C. But I just find it a really useful tool. So that's probably one of my biases that I go in and out of, sort of.
But even dealing with like general pop people, there's still something very rewarding about someone that was maybe have like crippled or niggles, and then suddenly they're coming training with you, pain free, moving unbelievable, and you're like, oh wow, that's pretty good. Because obviously with athletes,
you realize they're
genetically they're good, man. Anyway, like genetically
they're essentially the same in like
same thing.
You just need to get them feeling good, especially if they play like a real sport, not like a gym sport.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can essentially just treat them like high level gen pop who are a bit more robust.
What athletes?
Yeah. No, next 10 years, I don't know, it'd be sweet to put a surfer in the Olympics. That'd be awesome. And what was the other? It would be cool to have like a surfer and a weightlifter in the same Olympics.
Yep.
We'll see.
Who does all the Olympics over here? Do they train in
Well, it's pretty centralized, so like they don't like you. But I think I'd probably do it for another country because like Aussie weightlifters don't give a fuck about what I have to say.
Let's go to China.
Nah, it's like I've got a few weightlifters in the UK and things like that. And like none of those are going to be Olympians and things like that. But I'm like, starting to get a little bit of attention. So I just want to be part of someone's Olympic journey. I'm not going to put anyone in the Olympics. Yeah. That's the other thing. Coaches love to take credit for all the work their athletes do, especially weightlifting coaches. But I would just like to be, that's why I get a kick out of like, because they always want you to go through the coaching system in weightlifting. Everything's super centralized. They hate outsiders having opinions on the sport. So I just want to be able to have never done an official weightlifting certification or anything, but just get someone into just like the top of the sport.
Who else is good in weightlifting? What other countries?
Honestly, it's a lot more diverse nowadays because of CrossFit. It used to be really those like Eastern Bloc sort of countries and things like that. But now like America's weightlifting team is going to be very competitive, especially now that I don't know if Russia's going to be at this Olympics. I think they're still banned. Armenia's weightlifting federation's banned. So many. Egypt is banned. I think Poland's banned.
Really?
The IWF threatened to kick him out of the Olympics. They're like, we're hiring some advisors to help you sort of reform your organizational committee and things like that because it's too corrupt. And they listened to him for 2 weeks and then sacked him. And then the IWF was like, you really need to change. Otherwise, you're not going to be in the Paris Olympics. So all that's really up in
all those countries?
Yeah. So that's the thing. Probably won't even happen. I don't even know if weightlifting will be in the next Olympics.
Like we were saying, anatomically, it's kind of you're born a weightlifter. You're born in that certain
Well, that's my thing. Everyone in these weightlifting systems, you sort of see everyone in their country thinks that there's one way to do it, but then because people in different countries are usually built the same way, you see all these different built people on the international stage who've come from these, like, there's one way to do it systems, and they all look the same, but then you realize, like, there are actually two different approaches, but no one talks about that, because at an individual level, everyone's still saying that there's one way to do it. So in a certain sense, even though they're practicing it differently, everyone's agreeing that there's just, like, one way to do it, whereas, like, that's something that I would like the conversation around to change in a few years' time. Hopefully people more just actually acknowledging it's like, all right, we've seen all these, because we talked about how, like, you know, lanky people aren't actually built for weightlifting. Well, the Colombian weightlifting team's lanky as shit.
Really?
Dude, they've got some guys who are competing in the 94 kilo class who are, like, over 6 foot, which is just bananas for weightlifting. So it's like they're doing something. Like, and I think their technical model is, like, really, really interesting from, like, a non-traditional weightlifting perspective.
Because I know there's, like, difference in hip structure between, I don't know, white people, Asians, to a certain extent.
I don't think that's as big of a deal as people make out.
Is it not? What's do the Americans have, like, the African Americans? Is there more? Do they get into weightlifting?
Oh yeah. So CJ Cummings, he's just, like, an absolute freak, and it's like you're definitely sort of seeing that, like. Now it's a lot of colleges are offering scholarships and weightlifting programs and things like that. So the same thing, and now college athletes, I think, can have sponsors and things like that. So weightlifting will definitely, like, that talent development machine in the US, it's already begun, and it's just
even,
winding up.
Even with wrestling, like, there's hardly, I think it's like 2% of the people that wrestle is, like, African American. But then you see, like, Jordan Burroughs, these, like, freaks of nature.
Yeah.
And then there's a few women as well within that. I'm like, then even we see at the UFC now, like, they're dominating. 3
African champs. Yeah. Oh my God. It's like every now and then you just find that untapped talent pool. Like it happened with Russia.
Yeah.
Probably about 5 years ago. Where, like, there's all these guys with, like, beards and funny haircuts just ragdolling all these American dudes.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden the game adapts to it. So it's going to be interesting to see people adapting to that level of just sheer athleticism, though.
And maybe go over and pick a few people out and just get them weightlifting.
I can't imagine anything like more built for MMA than Ngannou existing.
Yeah.
Like surely something will come along one day, but I just can't picture a more perfect human violence machine.
No.
Like, because I thought Cyril Gane was, like, kind of that level of genetics, but then you look at him side by side, I'm like, Ngannou's still just...
It's ridiculous.
It's crazy.
It's annoying actually looking at him.
Because you feel like you could do it if you were built like him, right?
You might have a good gym session, you look in the mirror, you go, yeah, actually, I'm all right. And then you staunch around a little bit, and you go, I'm not, like, I have to look at this guy. Like, he just makes me feel so...
You know what the crazy thing is? He's in a cardio-based sport.
Yeah.
He's in a cardio-based sport, doesn't lift weights. Oh, he probably lifts a bit of weights, and he just... All that muscle. Have you seen Valerie Adams?
No.
Kiwi shot putter? There's a photo of her standing beside Sonny Bill Williams, and you're like, how has a women's NRL club not got in her ear and be like, what do we need? It would be unfair. She would break the sport. She would literally just run over the top of any women's NRL player. And I think women's NRL is, like, a really respectable sport now, but it's like there's still just those freak athletes out there. They're like, I don't even know if there's a man like that who's comparable to men, the same way Valerie Adams is to all the other women.
I'm just speaking on cardio, or you talking about UFC, what's to go with surfing? Is that its own...
So cardio based, but then a lot of the paddling around sort of...
But that is the sports cardio. You wouldn't do anything outside that? Would you look at
if you're surfing regularly? No. The only thing you need to do is maybe some postural stuff to facilitate your aerobic system, because, like, your biomechanics definitely impacts your physiology in a certain sense. Like, if you're adopting a posture that's compressing the part of your lungs that have the best blood supply, you're probably going to have to take in a higher volume of air to oxygenate your blood as much, or it's just not going to be easy to open up that bit where you can efficiently oxygenate your blood, so people end up hyperventilating and things like that. So there's definitely some postural considerations if you paddle around a lot and don't catch many waves, which is common for a lot of surfers.
Are you doing any cardio yourself other than surfing? Anything outside that? Anything different lately?
Nah, but that's honestly more so the laziness other than intent. I wouldn't mind getting back into... I think last time I came on here, I talked a big game about pounding the pavement, but then just kept working.
The problem is it does take away like if you're trying to train legs or you're trying to do surfing, you have that soreness.
Just a bit of impact.
Yeah, it's a bit of impact that.
Especially if you can't pronate your feet efficiently like us.
Both. I even look at, we were talking about my football boots back in the day were like the you just want the tightest pair of boots ever, and then you might have 2 pairs of socks so your feet are wedged in.
Yeah.
Their Foot Collective put a picture up as well. They're kicking off, those guys.
It's
I
so funny
I bought
as well.
their things
Like,
from them.
why do so many people blow their knee up playing footy? It's well, the studs. It's like you were meant to fall over, but instead you just blew your knee out because of the studs. But then you can't play without studs, and like that's why you can't fear injuries too much. You just got to look at what you're doing and be like, do I need to accept injuries as part of my life? If you're playing Gaelic football, it's like you probably just need to get comfy with that because you're just doing some stuff that's objectively stupid.
Now, in the moment it is, but I think, like we're saying, you just need to
so
counteract it with other stuff that does the opposite. So make sure your foot is, because even I've sprained my ankle a few times, and I look back, every match I would get my ankle strapped up, and I would never do any of the stuff I'm doing these days. That's why I'm always like, if I knew now what we're training, I'm like, oh, it's so annoying. But
when I was going in surfing competitions growing up, I was always looking at the kids who were beating me, and they always had crazy good ankle mobility.
Really?
And I've literally got I had 6 centimeters of dorsiflexion growing up because I grew up walking on my tippy toes like an idiot. But then you get into a sport like surfing, and I just used to look at their knees and ankles and the way that they were bent, and now knowing what I know about just being able to manipulate your center of mass instead of trying to stretch your ankles. All the physios were like, just stretch your ankles. I used to stretch them. Like, nah, you mustn't be doing it right. And it just makes you feel so bad because you're like, I am doing it. And then, then you learn it's just a matter of like, oh, you're already in dorsiflexion, and fuck, it would have helped so much.
Yeah, well, even Dave O'Sullivan, I was watching one of his presentations talking about dorsiflexion, where some people may be limited by like the muscles of the back, but sometimes your talus joints jacked up.
Usually, bones at the front not getting out of the way.
And if you can make space there, or some people may not, but yeah.
It's just limitless rabbit holes to go down.
It's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fun. I'm really enjoying it.
So what's the plans now? You obviously have your mentorship. Is that nearly finished?
Yeah, so the mentorship first ever intake, that kicks off on Sunday, and that's an 8-week program.
Oh, Sunday. Oh, wow.
Where we just sort of go through my entire training model, which is really scary. It's just like laying yourself bare for everyone.
No, but even, as you said, I'll buy coaches' programs just to see how they lay stuff out.
Yeah, that's what I hate.
Yeah.
You got to do it,
but
though.
just to like, it's the same, the chef's analogy where you just see people's menus and then they're seeing how they're putting together.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, you need to know the theory why behind it. That's the main thing. To make your own, you need to have the principles there first.
Yeah, and that's it. I'm just excited to sort of get through that and then just get more and more into the education side of things, because at the end of the day, that's it. I just want everyone thinking how I think and just spreading that influence.
Well, we were talking with George the day where when I was trying to change people's programs back in the day, I'm like, I don't know any variations. I'm like, the only thing I had to look at was
chest.
Either T Nation or Charles Pollock, and he had all these mad programs up, and I'd get some variations off it. But now, if you're not studying or upskilling, like, you either don't want to be in the industry, you're just here for a short time. Like, there's literally no excuse to not
it's
upskill.
So abundant,
It's ridiculous.
Especially with before you had to wait for the seminars to come to Australia, but now since Corona, it's all available online. So particularly for the Australian scene, I feel like there's really been this explosion in upskill, because over in the States, they're definitely experimenting, and they're not ahead across the board, but they're definitely like toying with more ideas a little bit quicker than they reach down under.
Yeah, but again, you're saying that because you're losing track of the fucking Gen Pop Fitness First.
Yeah, true.
That's the majority of trainers that are still on, so.
That's just a separate world though, hey? It's its own bubble, the Fitness First.
Well, even going to the gym now, we were in the sauna the day. One of the trainers, George, was there. She does heaps of yoga, Pilates, and she goes, "Oh, my neck's too tight. It was her shoulder or something." And George is like, "Oh, you're probably doing too much stretching." And then, like, obviously, without knowing, you just be like, "Well, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard." Yeah. Like, and she obviously thought George is the dumbest trainer ever.
Yeah, like, because of the way he talks.
Well, just like, you need to do more. Like, the stretching's causing you. She's like, no, I need to do more stretching. Like, you just again, you don't know how much you don't know.
Yeah, some people just can't believe that at a certain point the cure becomes the poison.
Yeah, that's exactly
like,
it.
Eventually people will get it through their head.
It was the funniest thing ever.
You can be an addict with anything.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I've realized. People judge people for getting addicted to some things, but like, you look into everyone for long enough and you find that thing that they just go a bit silly with. Unfortunately for some people, it's yoga.
We need to belong to something.
Yeah, 100%. But that's the thing, we trash it. Like, I just choose to belong to surfing now. It's a little bit less like,
yeah, that's all
you
right.
just go do what you want. No one can tell you you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So, half sport, half art.
So the mentorship Sunday, and then what else? Online clients and
just doing the online thing, using the shutdown in New South Wales as a bit of a break from face-to-face coaching, because I was just going ham in it for the last year or so. But then I really want to get a bit more of a weightlifting squad going in either Sydney or Wollongong or something like that.
Excellent.
Once things open back up again. But yeah, just trying to put a weightlifter in the Olympics if it's still there in 2024.
So if you're listening, you want to go to Olympics, contact Angus.
It's more if you got a kid who's like,
yeah, okay.
really good at a sport that they're about to make a departure from, and they're under 5'9".
In a non-creepy way, would you start like a fucking a kid's weightlifting? Like, would you have to start them early to that
Not
extent?
really, not as early as you think. Like, everyone talks about how they've got such an advantage starting at like 8 years old in China or Russia. It's like, get them into it by the time they hit puberty.
Okay.
Up until that point, even in those regimes, they're still doing like a lot of just general physical preparation. Like, they really do slow cook their athletes and things like that. You can slow cook your athletes for so long. Like, you look at Patrick Mahomes, I think he was still playing baseball and American football through college, and he got offered a ridiculous, like, record-breaking baseball contract, and now he's like highest paid guy in the NFL. Really? Yeah, that was a big misconception that we went through. Like, people like, oh, you know, don't specialize early, just specialize them when they hit puberty. And then we've realized, oh, it's still actually super early. Yeah. And I think everyone thought if they got their kids into lifting weights really young, that was a huge advantage. But then you realize that, like, athletic people they also reach their potential quick. So it doesn't matter if they find it when they're 8 or if they find it when they're 20. It's like they're just going to explode as soon as they find the weights anyway.
Excellent. And as we were talking about off air, your Instagram's going well. You're getting a bit more recognition, which is good to see the coaches that actually invest in themselves, educate, that information to get a bit more value these days. Probably a drop in the ocean compared to all the shite out there, but
try your best.
Yeah, but
there's plenty of people rolling their eyes at what I post, no doubt.
Yeah, but it's funny even within that, what they are disagreeing on is like the 1%ers.
It gets better. Yeah.
They're arguing within themselves of people that are pretty educated.
That's the thing. Shit trainers all the good trainers just end up slating each other because they all want to be top dog.
You should be together and tagging the rest of people that are just doing all this, but then
honestly, that's why this whole industry has just always be a bit of a joke to me, because like you get into that sort of scene, you realize it's just like high school anyway.
But even what you're saying with weightlifting, when you're saying like people can reach the Olympics doing different stuff, that's the way I think of it now, where I'm like, a few coaches could do their own educated method, even a bit different, and you could still lead to the same result. So there's no perfect way a lot of the time.
I think that's the renaissance we're going to come out of in the evidence-based era. It's like the evidence-based era was all about finding the way, and that's because it was such a shit show before. But then it's become science has just become its own dogma now. Like, people are a bit too worried about what's optimal. It's like, you need to do something that works and it's not too silly. And I think that's the phase we're heading into now. It's like, how many different things can you do that still get people the result they want? Yeah. And there's a lot.
And again, we're talking about in the sphere of
people
good trainers, not just like fucking random shit you probably see at your local gym.
I always forget you got a Gen Pop listener audience.
Yeah, we're in that field.
Just listen to Sean. Sean is just a good Gen Pop shepherd.
Trying to I like to show them who to go learn off. That's the go follow these people.
Because so many people who come through programs like yours, then they're like, oh, now I'm ready to have like a non-fat loss experience with the fitness industry, and then hopefully they come to someone like me.
Get them weightlifting. All right, Angus, thank you very much for coming on. We'll get you in the future anyway, obviously.
Always love it.
Talk to you soon.